fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Tuesday morning edition, Air Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Air Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. In all seriousness, off the top, it is Veterans Day. Want to thank the veterans for their service. Listen, transparently, friends, family have served. Also believe it yesterday was the 250th birthday for the U.S. Marines. So happy Veterans Day. Happy birthday to the Marines. We got ourselves today a jam-packed show. Okay, so first of all, by the way, should mention, college hoops tonight, Kentucky, Louisville. I did a preview last night. Many of you saw it. I stepped aside midstream. I was supposed to edit that out. People were wondering, what the heck did you do, Torres? I actually just adjusted. We have ourselves a jam-packed show. Okay, so this is what you need to know about today. Here's what you need to know. First of all, Lane Kiffin asked about his future, very non-committal, remains non-committal. And I'm just going to ask, like, what is going on? Why won't he commit to his future? Because that would be the easiest way to silence all of the critics and those questioning him. From there, we do have a situation at LSU. Brian Kelly, deal with the buyout, everything going on there. So that is a crazy situation. And then finally, we will talk about some other stuff. We got to talk a little bit about this UCLA Rose Bowl situation. I know it's kind of a little niche-y, but it feels pretty significant for the future of that Big Ten program. And then speaking of the Big Ten, this private equity deal is weird. It's sketchy. I don't know if I just question, everything now in this world that we live in. There's something suspicious going on with this private equity deal. We'll get you updated on that. By the way, a lot of college hoops on Tuesday night. There's a chance we'll go live Tuesday evening, but very likely we'll just do another show on Wednesday morning. Today, though, a lot of college football. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure you're subscribed to Air Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. We have surpassed 65,000 subscribers. And I'll just say this. November is just going to be bananas. With the coaching carousel stuff, there's going to be so much going on. So make sure that you're subscribed. Tell a friend, all of that good stuff. You can also listen to this show on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Before we get started, you know what I got to do. I got to thank our friends. I do have to thank our partners. I got to thank the ticketing partner of the Aaron Torres Pod. I got to thank SeatGeek and the SeatGeek app. Okay, so it's that time of year. Listen, maybe your football team is in the middle of a college football playoff run. Maybe your football team stinks, but maybe your basketball team's pretty good. Well, guess what? You want to go to games, you want to go to concerts, you want to go to shows, and so you need SeatGeek. It is America's #1 ticketing app, downloaded over 28 million times. I sound like Dr. Evil. Million times. 28 million times. But what I love about SeatGeek is two things, honestly. First of all, what I love about SeatGeek, they tell you about all their tickets. Good, bad, this, that. A green dot on every ticket means you could go ahead and purchase. A red dot means probably stay away. And every ticket on the app, whether it's a concert, game, whatever, is rated 1 through 10. You know what I really love about SeatGeek, though? I'm a little biased, but I love that they take care of listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod. That is right. SeatGeek is taking care of you. So you want to go watch your favorite team. You want to go to your rival stadium. Maybe it's college hoops. You want to check out a game. All you got to do is this. Download the SeatGeek app. If you use promo code Torres, that's promo code TORRES, you get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com, SeatGeek app. Promo code Torres gets you $20 off your first purchase. Again, it's not just games, although we recently, Paul, who's usually in the chat, bought tickets to an A&M game a few weeks ago. We had Indiana fans buying tickets to the Big Ten championship game. And so SeatGeek.com takes care of you. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. SeatGeek.com. Promo code Torres. With that said, woo, buddy. It is a busy Tuesday. Again, happy Veterans Day. Thank you to all the veterans who have served or are currently serving. We appreciate everything you do. With that said, busy afternoon. No more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. The topic of the day. He's really the topic of the month. He's really the topic of the college football world. It is Lane Kiffin. Let me say this. I am actually genuinely stunned on a day-to-day basis how much I get asked about Lane Kiffin, right? I'll be on a business call, and before we talk about, hey, let's bring on this advertiser or whatever, somebody will be like, what do you think Kiffin's going to do? You'll be on with friends that aren't even huge college football fans. You think Kiffin's going to Florida? You think he's going to LSU? So it's unbelievable. I was thinking about it earlier today. I was like, this guy has really been in the spotlight since his mid-20s at USC. NFL fans know him from the Raiders days. SEC fans have known him for 15 plus years because of the 1 year at Tennessee. West Coast fans know him because of his time at USC. This guy, just his history is unbelievable. Everybody seems to want to know what is his next move. And I will say this, is that I do find the whole situation with Lane Kiffin fascinating, right? Because we live in this world where he can say all of the right things. Hey, we're focused on Ole Miss. It's 1 week at a time. We're not worried about anything. But the longer this season goes on, without him making any sort of public commitment to Ole Miss, listen, there's an easy way for him to end all this speculation. All he's got to do is come out and say, I am committed to Ole Miss. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not taking any other calls. Let alone actually sign a contract extension. And so every day that he goes on without doing one of those two things, either a public extension or at least saying I ain't going anywhere, stop asking me about it, the more it becomes a story. And as a matter of fact, I will say this, watching his press conference on Monday, remember, Ole Miss ironically gets set to host Florida on Saturday. Of course, Florida believes they are in the Lane Kiffin market. It has now become, even his Monday press conferences, they're not about, hey, how do you stop the run? What do you think about zone defense? It's, hey, what is your future? What is going on? What's next? Okay, so Matt, we're going to do a little pivot from what I told you. I want to play the second piece of sound that I sent you first, okay? So this is how crazy things are getting at Ole Miss right now. One of the first questions that he was asked on Monday, and again, keep in mind that they are playing Florida. Many believe that he is the lead candidate at Florida. He was actually asked this concept of, hey, dude, you're an in-demand guy, but let me even backtrack. This piece of sound is going to show you how crazy things are at Ole Miss. The fact that at a Monday press conference, he was basically asked, hey, there's this perception that if you make the college football playoff, that you can't leave for another job. Do you believe that is true? So, Matt, play the second piece of sound where Lane Kiffin is basically asked, hey, if you got to choose between Ole Miss and Florida on the last day of the season, is that something you can do? Matt, play the sound.
Like you said a couple weeks ago, but if Florida wants you and if Ole Miss wants you, it'll necessitate you making a decision. I was just curious, with the portal opening on January 2nd, do you even have time to think about that, or how important is it to come to whatever decision before the portal opens?
I don't know. I'm not that far down the road. I said it last week, and you guys think I was joking, or the South Carolina, everybody wants to talk about other jobs and everything, and I think you're 2 or 3 weeks away from coaching for your own job, so you better make sure you're doing really well where you are, because as we've seen out there, I've said 1 win put you out of the top 10, now 2 wins might put you out of the top 25, and 3 might get you fired. So I ain't figured all that out. I'm trying to keep our winning streak, get to 8-0 at home.
Listen, I think that's a good answer, right? Hey, I'm focused on winning this game because, if I lose 2 or 3 of these in a row, forget other jobs. Y'all are going to want me out of here. Same time, though, that is the type of question that Lane Kiffin is being asked. By the way, let's keep in mind, That is a Monday press conference. Okay. That's not post game when national media is there, when the other team's media is there. Like, there's no Florida reporters probably likely in Mississippi on a Monday press conference. So it was very likely his own media member that was asking him, hey, high school recruiting, the signing day is in December. Portal opens in January. Like, how would you balance hypothetically a coaching job? Okay. So that was the first piece of sound that was interesting. And again, there's an easy way for Lane Kiffin to end these questions. Say, yeah, I don't know why you're asking me this because I am not going anywhere. My agents are working now on an extension for me at Ole Miss. That is the way Dan Lanning has answered it. Even, we can accuse Lincoln Riley of lying, but Lincoln Riley did answer a question about his future the other day. And so you have that question. Then you have another question. This is the same press conference from Monday. And this to me is very interesting because there is now a perception that basically what qualifies as a good job has changed, right? So this is the big conversation is, do you even need to leave an Ole Miss in 2025, or can you build it up at Ole Miss and do everything at Ole Miss that you could do at an LSU, at a Florida? Could you be, say, in the Big Ten, does Matt Rule need to leave Nebraska? Or, that's probably not even a good example. Like, basically, in this era with NIL and the transfer portal, what even qualifies as a good job? And I think there's a perception like, oh, Ole Miss, that's as good of a job, if not better of a job than LSU and Florida. And so everybody is waiting on that. Even Nick Saban was like, look, what makes a good job has changed. Well, Lane Kiffin was asked about that. And again, with the backdrop of he may have a very tough decision to make over the next couple weeks, listen to what he says because he opens it. And if you're an Ole Miss fan, now this is a long clip, but I wanted to play the full sound, so I wanted to be fair to Lane Kiffin. I want to be transparent. I'm not trying to get him with a gotcha moment of 10 seconds where he says something crazy, okay? But he's asked about what makes a good job. And the first probably about 30 to 40 seconds or so is him basically talking about, you know what, it's changed. It's about NIL. It's about what money you have to pay your players. But then the longer the conversation goes on, the longer his answer goes on, he starts talking about other stuff that makes it sound like there are some other jobs that, in his opinion, may actually be better than the one he's got. Long piece of sound, but again, I wanted to be fair to Lane Kiffin. It's about a 2-minute clip. Matt, go ahead and play the second piece of sound from Monday's press.
The aspects that make up a good job for a college head coach, what's the top of your priority list?
I wasn't ready for that one. I think that's evolved and changed, and there's different things in it. I've said to you guys a couple years ago, I think, and this was before Cap, but I said, I think that it's going to move to, people used to say, okay, when people wanted to hire you or something and interview and what questions do you have, what are your concerns? Okay, people used to say, facilities, how many practice fields, those things. And I said, I don't think, I think that's changed. It's going to change. And it's going to be, how much NIL do you have? When it was all collective, how is your collective? How's it run? How much do you have? Because that's before this, that was the salary cap, meaning that's how much money you're going to have. And some people sometimes think, well, okay, that's not a big deal, but just look at professional sports when it's not the same, like baseball and the payrolls. And over time, who wins and who doesn't win. And somebody may have outlier years once in a while, but, and so now that's a little equaled out, but there's still, how much are you giving to Rev, to your football program? And then how much do you have collective wise? I think it's a big question, but, people will talk about it's narrowed, like I heard Coach Saban say, and some stuff has narrowed, and as I referred to, because you can't stockpile, at those, whatever blue bloods you want to call it or refer to it. But there's still things there that you're still going to struggle to beat those guys, because kids are still recruited and they see size of stadiums and tradition and Heismans and national championships and then your location, to talent. So I think all those are in there, but it's slid a little time over, I think when that question probably early was that what is your assistant coach's pool? Now is what is your player pool?
So I saw that clip on social media on Monday, and it was funny because the first wave of people was Ole Miss fans that saw that and said, "See, it's about a collective. Nobody does it better than us." I believe the guy is Walker Jones. I want to say the guy that runs the Ole Miss collective. I actually met him. I sat on a panel with him one time. Really nice guy. But he was just like, "Yeah, it's all about the NIL. It's all about NIL, and it's all about this." And then the deeper he goes into the conversation, he starts talking about, you know what? It is about NIL, but it's also about, once you get kids on campus, it's about how big your stadium is, how many Heismans you've had, how many NFL guys you've had. And so to me, this goes back to what I have been saying. And listen, I will say this because I know people are saying, oh, all you're doing is you have no proof. No, I have no proof what Lane Kiffin wants to do. Okay. I'm not claiming that I know what Lane Kiffin wants to do because I don't think anyone, including Lane Kiffin at this exact moment, knows what he wants to do. But by definition, in saying that he does not know what he wants to do or saying that no one knows what he wants to do, that also means that he is leaving open the option of not being the Ole Miss head coach next year. And by the way, we got Ole Miss fans in the chat. I'm not trying to crap on your team or crap on your program. I've been to Oxford. It's a beautiful city. I had a blast. I was there probably 8-9 years ago at this point. I love Oxford. Listen, I think for college football, it's kind of good if he stays in Oxford. But I have to talk about the stories that matter in the manner that we need to discuss them. And the longer that he goes on without being committal long-term, the more it leaves the door open that that he could leave. Now, really quickly, Matt, I'm just going to pull up the comment that I saw because I think it plays into what I want to talk about. So Walter Happy Hopper, great listener, Walter, we appreciate your support. He says Lane has never signed an extension during the season. This has happened 4 years in a row here at Ole Miss. Walker, it's a great question, and it's a great comment. Here is my issue with that, though. You don't have to sign the extension tomorrow. But if listen, you're going to get whatever you want from wherever you're going to go, whether it is money, whether it's staff pool, whether it's NIL, whether it's whatever. You're going to get that wherever. I've said from probably the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've said Lane Kiffin is going to end up the highest paid coach in college football next year. It's just a question of, is it going to be at Ole Miss? Is it going to be at Florida? Is it going to be at LSU? In theory, is it going to be somewhere else? Okay. But at the same time, I understand that he hasn't signed any extension until the end of the season. I vividly remember, when he agreed to stay at Ole Miss instead of going to Auburn. It was the Saturday morning of Thanksgiving weekend, 2022. So, I get what you're saying, Walter, excuse me. I think I said Walter. But the counter to that is that if he wants to end the noise, if he wants to put his entire fan base at ease, if he wants to put his players at ease, he can say, look, yes, we are negotiating something to keep me here long-term. This is where I want to be. It's not done yet, but I promise you, not only am I not taking any calls, my representation is not taking calls either, and he has not done that. It's very easy to do that. Again, you mentioned, Walter, that the last 3 or 4 years, he has signed an extension at the end of every year. Okay. But the counter to that is the last 3 or 4 years, Dan Lanning's name has been in job searches, and every single year he says, I'm not going anywhere. Don't ask me about this. I told my agent, don't take any calls. That's listen, I'm not saying one way is right or wrong. I'm just saying if you have zero interest, there is a way to do it in which you don't have to answer these questions. Listen, there's an easy way to do it. You know how you do it? You do it the way Matt Rule did it. You know how Matt Rule has to stop answering questions about Penn State? Guess what? He signs an extension that keeps him at Nebraska. Now, you could argue he was taking questions until he signed it. He could have announced it earlier. It doesn't change the fact Matt Rule is not getting questions about Penn State anymore because he signed the extension. Rhett Lashley is not getting questions anymore about Arkansas or any other job because he signed an extension at SMU. And so all I'm saying is the longer this goes on, the more speculation it's going to create, and whether Lane Kiffin wants it or not, the more distractions he's going to have. Again, we're not going to replay the sound, but listen to the questions he's being asked. He's being asked straight up, if you got to choose between Ole Miss and Florida on the final day of the season, what are you going to do? How does the portal impact it? How does a high school recruiting impact it? And so there are just so many easy ways to end this conversation. He refuses to do it. My last thought as I was listening to all that sound yesterday, I do think his non-commitment to Ole Miss, in my opinion, changes a little bit of what we talked about a few weeks ago when he was on Pat McAfee. If you remember, he was on Pat McAfee. We're going to play the sound in half a second. But he was basically asked about all these different things that are out there. He said, money does not define who I am. Matt, played Lane Kiffin. This was now several weeks ago. So I want to be clear. It was not from this previous Monday, but probably from about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Matt, play Lane Kiffin on the McAfee show.
Go to that, what Pat said there, just so you know, because you haven't known me very long, Pat. I have never made a decision based off of money, nor will I. And
Love that.
For a lot of people, they're just like, well, money and it does this and does that. I've seen too many examples in life where money does not buy happiness. So I am never going to make a decision off of money, nor do I care about it. And
it's good to have.
Jimmy Sexton gets really mad when I say that.
He's got enough.
We got to get this. We got to get this. And I'm like, Jimmy, I don't care. And he goes, I do.
He said, that's why I'm here. Of course. Yeah. That is why I'm here. But
to the Jackson, he's awesome.
So one, I actually forgot that Jimmy Sexton part at the end. It cracked me up. But what I would also say, I do think when you hear that sound again with the context of what Lane Kiffin said, I just think it makes for an interesting couple weeks. And again, only Lane Kiffin knows. And I do think part of this is going to be how deep does Ole Miss go in the playoff? At this point, it's hard to imagine a scenario where Ole Miss is not in the playoff. Okay, remember, they're 9-1, final 2, Florida at home this weekend, then at Mississippi State. In theory, they could go 1-1 in those 2 games, and they would still make the college football playoff. And so the big question is a Florida, is an LSU willing to wait until that playoff run is over? But I will say, when I hear that McAfee sound with what he said on Monday, it does change things a little bit for me, right? Because he said to McAfee, I'm not motivated by money. So it's not just going to be about the highest bid. It's going to be about what job puts you in the best position to win at the highest level consistently. And then when you go to the second answer that he gave that we listened to earlier, where he says, yeah, it's about NIL, revenue creation. And yes, it's about money for players, but it's also about stadium size, all the things that recruiting that players still care about. So fascinating conversation. Only Lane Kiffin knows. But what I keep going back to is if he was not a candidate at Florida, maybe LSU, there's an easy way for him to end that speculation and just say, we're working on an extension. I'm not going anywhere. If he wants to stay at Ole Miss, there's no reason he has to create extra leverage. I think he's keeping his options open, and we'll see what happens after Ole Miss's season ends, when it ends, and how long other schools are willing to wait. Tell you what, Matt, before we get to a break in LSU, couple interesting comments. We got to Walter's question. Is there anything else? We don't have to lead with the one that I start. Is there anything specifically on Kiffin? By the way, I see a weirdly large number of thoughts on the UCLA Rose Bowl situation. I think I'm probably actually the best person to speak about that, so we'll get to that in a minute. But, Matt, you could pop up any questions that you may have. So Adam, who is a diehard Gators fan, he's been listening to this show for years, says, I'm hearing outside of Kiffin's salary of $13.5 million, Florida is countering with the most assistant coaching money and NIL budget that is staggering. Billy got stupid. I'll tell you this. 1, Florida is a total dumpster fire, okay? 2, I'm guessing a lot of those contracts are coming off the books this year. And yeah, I mean, listen, to me, this is what it's going to keep coming down to. What it's going to keep coming down to is Ole Miss can offer him a lot. But we have to listen, I love Lane Kiffin, but even I love Nick Saban, but even Lane Kiffin acknowledged this nonsense about, all jobs are the same now because of NIL. That's not true. It's certainly in a different era when players couldn't transfer every year. It was about recruiting base and that, but all that stuff does still matter. I give Lane Kiffin credit for by the way, I give Lane Kiffin credit for answering all these questions, but again, you just look at play. By the way, one quick thought, and I've said this on Florida and I stand by it. I think everybody looks at some of the negatives about Florida as negatives and they're actually positives. I've said this is like, if you remember when, Billy Napier got fired, everyone's like, oh, I mean, they've gone through 4 coaches since Urban Meyer. This job isn't very good. I'm like, actually, it's kind of the opposite, right? Because Billy Napier was a dumpster fire. Okay, we can all acknowledge that. But the previous 3 head coaches since Urban Meyer all either had a 10-win season, an SEC championship game appearance, or both. Will Muschamp, believe it or not, had an 11-win season as the Florida Gators head coach. Jim McElwain, back-to-back SEC title game appearances. Also, Dan Mullen, back-to-back 10-win seasons plus an SEC title game appearance. So I just bring it up because everyone's talking about all these problems with the Florida job and all these guys. Well, if the guys who aren't the right fit are consistently winning, or at least at times winning 10 games, and at the time making the SEC championship game out of the SEC East, it actually means it's a really good job. By the way, I was also thinking this almost does remind me of, everyone's so focused on the Florida gig. What if Lane Kiffin's like, I'm not interested in Florida, but secretly maybe LSU? Because when he describes stadium size recruiting base, I would actually argue LSU probably stands better than even Florida does. Adam, I hate to ruin the comment because I know you're a Gators fan, but it'll be interesting to see. I'll tell you what, Matt, let's go ahead and take a quick break. We'll come back. Speaking of LSU, oh, you thought it was chaotic? You thought it was chaotic when the governor was giving press conferences? You ain't seen nothing yet. Quick break. Chaos on the Bayou. Yeah, we'll be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So chat is humming. A couple quick things. One, I see a couple people talking the Louisville, Kentucky game. We will do a show tomorrow morning, very likely recapping that game. Did do a preview of it last night. For people who have not watched it yet, check it out. By the way, I mentioned off the top, there was a moment during that recording where the room kind of got hot, so I went to change the temperature. I thought I edited it out. I did not. And a lot of people had a lot of fun in the comments section, questioning why I left in the middle of the segment what I may have been doing the comments are pretty good. All right, let's switch gears. By the way, comments are humming. I got a lot on the UCLA Rose Bowl situation. We'll get to that in a minute. But what I want to do now, I want to talk about a program that, I think it's been about a week since we've discussed. That's the LSU Tigers. Okay, so LSU, I don't think there's any other way to put it. It's free. I mentioned this off the top, right? I said the Lane Kiffin thing, I get so many random questions about people that barely even follow college football. Where do you think he's going? Do you think he's going to LSU? You think he's going to Florida? Whatever. Well, I bring it up because you know what other college football story had that effect? Jeff Landry's press conference a few weeks ago about, snap that turned into an LSU football conversation, okay? I've had so many people over the last 2 weeks like, oh my God, what was that about? Is it really that chaotic? And I do think it showed just how crazy things are in Louisiana. And I'm not here to judge any city, any state, any whatever. Listen, we all have chaos in our lives. There's chaos in our political system. I'm not here to criticize Louisiana, okay? But at the same time, I will say it's making for great drama, okay? Because I was thinking about this. Just since let's go from the second that the LSU game ends against Texas A&M to where we are now, okay? So it starts, first of all, people forget, Governor Landry was tweeting about the game, right as the game goes final. That week, if you remember, what was it? The LSU announced that they were going to raise ticket prices, and the governor was like, you need to rethink that. Then you have the next day where after the dust settles after the A&M loss, Brian Kelly meets with Scott Woodward. At that point, Brian Kelly and Scott Woodward get in a fight. Brian Kelly gets fired. Then Scott Woodward gets fired. Then the governor makes his press conference. Then the governor hires a school president. Then an interim AD is named. Then the interim AD is named the full-time AD. Then the school president says, I'm not really sure if that guy's actually the full-time AD. And so it's just been one piece of crazy news after another. And then, oh, by the way, LSU looked listless and lifeless against Alabama. And, oh, by the way, Garrett Nussmeier did get benched. And I thought, topic that we probably should have hit on harder on Sunday's show. Garrett Nussmeier, Frank Wilson is not committing to playing Garrett Nussmeier going forward. So it's chaotic at LSU. But even by the chaotic LSU standards, Monday took on entirely new twists and turns. Okay. So on Monday, it was interesting. Monday's kind of an in-between day for us. We generally don't do a live show because we go Sunday morning reacting to the weekend. But Monday morning, this first report about Brian Kelly starts to surface, is that there had been previous reports that, he's, they're going to figure out the buyout and it's no big deal. And if you remember last week before the Alabama game, he released a statement thanking LSU. I think he referenced family more than once in that statement. But I bring it up because you kind of thought, okay, the dust is settling, everything's calming, whatever. Well, apparently not, because on Monday we had a report from ESPN. I think it was kind of a generic write-up. Mark Schlabach, who's been in hiding since the Arizona basketball situation, the OGs know what I'm talking about. Mark Schlabach put out an article that basically said, oh yeah, that Brian Kelly situation that you thought was figured out, it is not. Matt, put up the first wave of commentary from ESPN. According to documents obtained by the Baton Rouge Advocate, so I guess it was the Baton Rouge Advocate that broke this story, former LSU AD Scott Woodward. Okay, so let me even backtrack. Matt, you can put me back on screen for half a second, okay? So basically, again, there was this assumption that Brian Kelly and LSU, when he was fired after the dust settled that first day or so, that basically that they were going to come to some sort of understanding on the buyout, okay? So to go back to the quote tweet, you can pop it back up. Apparently, we are nowhere close to having a buyout, okay? So this is according to documents obtained by the Baton Rouge Advocate. Former LSU AD Scott Woodward offered Brian Kelly 2 different settlements to settle his buyout, both of which Brian Kelly rejected. According to the Baton Rouge Advocate, first, there was an offer of a lump sum payment of $25 million on the day he was fired. Why is that interesting? That was essentially what Scott Woodward offered Coach O the day that Coach O got fired. And if you remember, Coach O famously said, you're going to pay me 20 plus million right now in one check. And the quote, not quite verbatim, but almost verbatim, was like, where do I sign and what door do you want me walking out of? Okay, so I think Scott Woodward probably felt like, yeah, Brian Kelly's going to take the same deal. I know. Brian Kelly turned it down. Then this part is kind of crazy. Woodward also offered to remove the mitigation language in Brian Kelly's contract, which would have reduced the buyout if he coached again. LSU executive director of athletics, Julie Cromer, later increased the settlement offer to $30 million in 2 payments, according to documents that via ESPN. All right. So, things are a little bit sketchy at LSU. This story is incredible to me. Okay. Again, the context of this matters. Okay. So Scott Woodward, whatever you think of him, he's kind of known as this big swinging, and he makes deals and this and that. And so, like I just said, I think he thought, I'm going to offer him the Coach O Godfather, basically the Publishers Clearinghouse check. I'm going to offer him a check for $25 million today. We're going to write it and you're going to get out of here and you're going to thank me for the $25 million. And Brian Kelly was like, I know, I'm good. You're going to pay me all $54 million if I never coach again. Then apparently Scott Woodward took it up another level and said, we'll give you the blank check for $25 million. And we will remove any stipulation in your contract. Remember, there was a mitigation clause, I should say, that basically said, like, look, we'll pay you this buyout, but you have to search for other work. And if you get another job, your salary there will be offset here, right? And so again, it's one of those situations where if Brian Kelly, say, gets the Michigan State job. Michigan State isn't open, but let's say it opens, and they pay him $7 million a year, and he's owed $9 million a year at LSU or $10 million a year. They would only have to pay $3 million. So I hope that mitigation makes sense. But Brian Kelly basically said, "Kick rocks, give me all my money." Didn't take not one, not two, but 3 different settlement situations. Okay, well, this is where it gets very interesting. That first quote that I showed you was from Monday morning, basically saying we thought he was going to settle. He does not settle. By the end of the day, the tune has changed for LSU. Let's see what Dan Wetzel reported late Monday night. Things have changed. This, according to Dan Wetzel, ESPN. The school, according to a position for declaratory judgment, I know it's just legalese, but it says, is now seeking to fire Brian Kelly for cause and potentially pay him a full and potentially avoid paying him a full buyout of nearly $54 million. The filing claims that LSU informed Kelly's representatives of the position Monday. According to a copy of the suit obtained by ESPN, quote, LSU's representatives had a call with Coach Kelly's representatives where LSU took the position that Coach Kelly had not been formally terminated and informed Coach Kelly's representatives for the very first time that LSU believes it has grounds for cause for termination. Whew. All right. A lot of legalese, but I do think this is very, 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 very interesting, okay? So as of Monday morning, LSU had offered Brian Kelly 3 different options to settle, the whole situation and not pay him the full $54 million. First, they offered him $25 million lump sum Publishers Clearinghouse check. Just take this $25 million. We'll give it to you today if you just agree not to the rest of the buyout. Brian Kelly's like, nah, I'm good. Then they said, we'll give you $25 million and we'll take out the mitigation clause, basically saying that you don't even have to look for work. Nobody cares. Brian Kelly's like, nah, I'm good. Then after Scott Woodward was fired, they countered with a third option of, we'll give you 2 separate $15 million checks for a total of $30 million. And Brian Kelly's like, nah, I'm good. And so then what happened from there? On Monday, LSU pivoted and said, okay, you don't want to take our offer. We're actually not going to pay you anything. And basically, LSU is going to fight in court that he was fired for cause. Now, what does that mean? And I know this is legalese, but let me explain it because this is actually legitimately fascinating. And then we'll talk about what it means for the coaching search big picture. As far as the firing for cause part of it, the firing for cause, what that means is that, previously, basically every contract, I think pretty much anywhere, has a fire for clause situation where basically if you do something that either breaks the rules, so in this case it's NCAA stuff, it's, back in the day, they used to do this with if you violated NCAA rules. that's you could be fired for cause, basically meaning you didn't live up to the end of the contract, right? But then there's also, conduct clauses. And I know this is a little nerdy, but it's like, if you break the law, if you do something stupid, if you basically act in a way that is detrimental to the university, we can fire you with cause. And if we fire you with cause, it basically makes the contract null and void. And that means we ain't paying you a dime. And so LSU in one day has now completely flipped its stance of, we're willing to pay you $30 million to actually, you know what? You broke your contract. We're paying you zero. And so there are two different things here. One, there's this is just going to be a fascinating court situation case. And we don't talk a lot about those kinds of things. I don't think most of you are interested in all of that. But the back and forth, I think, to me, is fascinating, right? Just what happens with Brian Kelly. Does he get his money? Does he not get his money? Does he feel like he has to take another job? All of that. So there's that part of it. I think there's a couple other things. I think Scott Waterward, the former AD, I thought he'd get another AD job. Now, like, his big thing is, I make big hires and they work out. Well, now you not only fired your handpicked coach, you got into a fight with him on the way out. The whole thing started because Brian Kelly wouldn't fire the OC. And then you try to get into a negotiation with Brian Kelly, and all of a sudden you can't get out of the contract that you signed. So I think it's going to be hard for Scott Woodward to get a job. I was also thinking, for years we heard about basically like what a jerk Brian Kelly was. Well, I mean, listen, you hire a jerk, you're going to get jerk type actions when it's time to fire him. So this is just fascinating. Okay. But what is also fascinating is what it means for the LSU job, because I think there's two ways to look at it. How much does it impact the LSU job? Or maybe it doesn't impact the LSU job at all. Okay. As far as why I think it might impact the LSU job, it sure does look chaotic over there, doesn't it? Listen, we could sit here and say, oh, it doesn't matter. Coaches want to coach. LSU's a great job. But it's like, it does feel like there's a lot going on at LSU. You have the situation where the governor is coming out and clearly, like, the governor, whatever you think, clearly like overly involved with the LSU football program, might scare off some candidates. Two, you now have a situation where the school is fighting with the coach over his buyout money. That's interesting to me because, one, I don't think it'll scare off every candidate, but like, look, I actually am not a Brian Kelly defender in this case. I don't I think when you're the LSU coach, you can't lose to Vandy. You can't lose to Ole Miss consistently. You can't get blown out by Texas A&M at home. You can't get the doors blown off and the stadium's empty and it's all Texas A&M. So I understand why he got fired. What I would also argue is he was 34-14 as LSU's head coach. And so I think there's already some coaches that are like, I don't care how good the job is. Dude won, do the math on that. What is that, about, 65-70% of his games in the SEC, and he still got fired? That scares me. And now you have this chaos. And now on top of all of it, forget the governor. They're trying not to pay him. Like, if I stink, I want all my money. And so I do think there's a scenario where coaches have to be like, am I really doing this? Am I really committing to this? So I think there's that. I would add, though, the counter to that is like, golly, it is still a good job. And I will say, I do wonder in reality if it will actually, because first of all, it only takes one coach that's like, it's LSU. I got, all the things that Lane Kiffin talked about in his press conference on Monday. I got access to some of the best high school talent in America. Every kid in Louisiana wants to play at LSU. I've talked about this. I find it fascinating. Lamar Brown is the number 1 rated high school player in the class of 2026. Admittedly, he's from Baton Rouge. Like, he lives 5 minutes from LSU's campus. But he was tweeting out positive stuff about LSU on Monday. We don't even know who the head coach is going to be, right? So, like, that's the allure of LSU. Every kid in Louisiana wants to come play for that state university. And it really kind of doesn't matter who the head coach is. You know what it kind of reminds me of? Back in the 90s and early 2000s, Miami kind of had that reputation of, like, if you're from South Florida, you're playing for the name on the front of the jersey. You don't even care who the head coach is. Dennis Erickson, Butch Davis, Larry Coker, Jimmy Johnson, whoever. We're Southern Florida kids. We want to play for University of Miami. And so it's a fascinating conversation. And I do wonder if it actually impacts the actual coaching search, where coaches are looking at it, or are they just saying, I got a chance to coach LSU? Because listen, however the Brian Kelly thing happened, That was essentially how you got Brian Kelly out of Notre Dame. Remember, there were a lot of guys that turned down that job or took extensions that season. Brian Kelly said, I'm the head coach at Notre Dame, but I got a chance to go to LS freaking U. Yes, sign me up for that. So it'll be interesting, but I thought we had to talk about that. Just a fascinating topic as Brian Kelly, he's digging his heels in. I'm fascinated to see what it means for his future, but I'm also fascinated to see, does that scare away any candidate? Does the governor scare away any candidate? Does the fact that LSU now is trying to fight that they fired him with cause scare away candidates? Fascinating conversation on LSU. All right. Come back. One more segment. Matt, if we have any good LSU comments, we can get to them after the break. We'll take one more break. And I'll say this. I do want to talk about this Rose Bowl SoFi. This is low key. We talk about, how far college sports has gone off the rails. LSU wants to pay $54 million to get rid of Brian Kelly. UCLA might be paying $80 million to get out of their Rose Bowl deal. I live in SoCal. I used to live in Pasadena, so I feel like I'm a pretty good person to talk about this. Quick break. Talk some stadium controversy. That's next. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, you know what we got to do. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to go ahead and thank Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Yeah, you see the logo on the back of the screen right here. Okay, so I've told you all about Cauley Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge sports fan, and one day he was sitting on the couch and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something my kids are going to love, something my family's going to love, something I'm going to love. And so he came up with Cauley Puffs. This is the new age health food snack. You don't need to go to the grocery aisle and buy all that crap, the Doritos, the Fritos. No, my friends, you need Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But here's the best part. They taste freaking delicious. Actually, there's another best part. In addition to tasting delicious, in addition to being healthy, they are also taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Okay, so check this out. All you got to do is go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, and you can get 15% off any purchase with the promo code Torres. That's Torres, Torres. It's that simple. 15% off any purchase. One bag to try them out, 100 bags to cater a party. Doesn't really matter. Promo code Torres. CauleyPuffs.com gets you 15% off. Cauley Puffs also available on Amazon. You obviously can't get the promo code there, but CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. Thank you to our friends at Cauley Puffs. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Matt, I actually see a couple questions that I want to get to. You've starred a few of them. First of all, I love this. Rel MX 159 says, shout out the San Diego State Aztecs. We don't talk enough mid-major and group of five stuff here. Shout out San Diego State. Good football, good basketball team. Dennis says, release the Epstein files. I don't know if that's really my area of expertise, so I'll save that for somebody else. Real C LMX also says, happy Veterans Day. I mentioned it off the top. Thank you to all the veterans. Thank you for everything that you've done. My father's a veteran. My cousin's a veteran. My best friend, best man at my wedding is a veteran. Thank you all for everything that you've done. Really quickly, there is a couple other ones. Luke brought this up. I meant to actually send this to producer Matt. So as far as the Brian Kelly buyout stuff, Tom Mars, famous lawyer. We actually talked about him. He's got some Arkansas ties. But he came out on Twitter and basically said schools have a 0% success rate when trying to retroactively say a firing was for cause. This seems like a waste of resources at LSU. Well, listen, Luke, thank you for the comment. You're 100% right. Tom Mars is 100% right. You know where I know this from? My alma mater, UConn. Remember the name Kevin Ollie? Won the 2014 national championship. Then it completely went sideways. Well, I just bring it up because Kevin Ollie, people forget this. He actually, got fired, and then UConn tried to fire him for cause, and they basically lost in court, and they ended up having to pay out every single dollar that was owed to him. So just an absolutely fascinating situation. Great call and great pull by Luke there. By the way, Darren our number one listener in Australia. The growth of this show to me is just unbelievable. But Darren in Australia is tweeting about the Louisville, Kentucky line. He said out in Australia, the Louisville, Kentucky line is moving like crazy. I think I lost that tweet. Where is it? Just want to give a shout. Oh, look at that. Darren, thank you. Matt, thank you for finding the tweet. I always say tweet. It's not a tweet. It's a comment in the chat. But Darren says, the Kentucky-Louisville line is back down to 3.5 in Australia, went from 3.5 to 6.5 in an hour, stayed at 6.5, now back down to 3.5. Never seen anything like that before. Darren, just thanks for listening in Australia, dude. This is cool, man. I'm streaming this show from a place in California, and to have listeners in Australia, we had somebody check in from Germany. By the way, everybody drop your whereabouts, where you're listening from here on a Tuesday morning. Drop it in the chat. We appreciate your support. All right, let's switch gears because actually, Matt, remind me to do Circa at the end because I'm fired up about this Rose Bowl situation now. So let's talk. I mentioned I live in SoCal. I think, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic or facetious when I say this, I think there is literally no better person in the media to talk about the UCLA Rose Bowl situation than me. Okay, so quick backstory, because a lot of people just don't know my background. Because I even have now, like, are you from the South? You talk a lot of college football, SEC. So I'm from Connecticut. I went to the University of Connecticut. In 2012, I did move to Southern California, though. It was kind of a combination of personal stuff, job opportunities, etc. Been at Fox Sports in some capacity since basically 2013. Still host radio, by the way. This podcast is 100% independent of Fox Sports. But I moved to California, and I moved to Pasadena. And so I could tell you, lived in Pasadena for a long time. Beautiful community. If you've never been, the Rose Bowl is a beautiful venue to watch games. But obviously, look, and by the way, Pasadena's unbelievable. I would move back to Pasadena in a second. It's just crazy expensive, in part because of the proximity to the Rose Bowl and all that. Okay. So anyway, there's been this thing over the last couple weeks and really like the last month or so. Okay. So UCLA, we all know, kind of a weird time. Chip Kelly leaves. Deshaun Foster takes over. Deshaun Foster's a mess. He gets fired. And every Friday and Saturday, it's this big conversation about UCLA on TV. It's an embarrassment what the Rose Bowl looks like, okay? 100,000, it's probably like a 93, 94,000 seat stadium right now. I mean, there are games where there's probably 15 to 20,000. Now, it doesn't help a couple things. One, it's super far from UCLA's campus. That is indisputable. It's like 25 miles, even without traffic. It's a 40-minute drive. And I think, frankly, with traffic, it's just a disaster, okay? Two, it also doesn't help that, like, it's spectacularly hot in Pasadena in September and October. Like, I've said this for years, and I think the Big Ten has actually done a good job of helping out with this. The Arizona schools are not allowed to play outdoor games during the day in September. And August, obviously, too. And I bring it up because UCLA, when they were in the Pac-12, they would have these noon Pacific kickoffs. It'd be 110 degrees with no sun, no shade, no whatever. So that played a role. And then let's just be honest. The team has not been very good. Been inconsistent, been whatever. And so I bring it up because there's just all sorts of talk of, like, what should UCLA do? What can they do? Is there anything they can do? Because they're locked in to this Rose Bowl deal, this lease with the Rose Bowl for basically like another 20 years, okay? And so basically you're stuck at the Rose Bowl for another 20 years. And so I bring it up because probably about 2 weeks ago, this report starts to surface that UCLA is thinking about moving their home games to SoFi Stadium, which is where the Rams and the Chargers play, okay? And so I actually didn't really think much of it because I thought they can't get out of that lease. I've lived in Pasadena. I can tell you this. I literally know people that served on, like, the Committee of Roses or whatever it's called. Like, all of the institutional arrogance that, and I love Pasadena, but all of the institutional arrogance that you think comes with the Rose Bowl and the Rose Parade and the Tournament of Roses and all that, that institutional arrogance is real, right? I mean, remember, for years, we couldn't play college football games on anything. We couldn't play college football games because it had to focus around the Rose Bowl, right? So, like, you had to have the Rose Bowl January 1st. And if the Rose Bowl, if New Year's Day wasn't January 1st, you had to accommodate around it. I could go on and on. But I bring it up because you start to hear these rumblings, and then over the weekend, you heard, let me even backtrack. You heard rumblings that they could move to SoFi. I didn't really think much of it. Then over the last 3 or 4 days, it really picked up steam. And as a matter of fact, on Sunday morning, I tuned into social media, and it's like, I found an article, and it's like, oh, this is done. And so I thought, it was like, how are they getting out of this deal with the Rose Bowl? I'm like, what am I missing in this story? Well, I pulled up the article. It's from one of the UCLA, news outlets. And this part of the article was stunning to me. Matt, you go ahead and pop it up. The motivation behind the move from the Rose Bowl to SoFi Stadium is almost entirely financial. UCLA believes the revenue generated from premium seating and luxury suites at SoFi Stadium is worth the move. The plan is for UCLA to buy out the lease it currently holds with the city of Pasadena and the Rose Bowl operating company. The lease runs through June of 2044, and sources estimate it would cost $60 to $80 million to extract itself from the agreement via Bruin Report Online, which is the 24/7 outlet. But if you missed that, I want to make sure that I repeat that loud and clear. We are talking about a $60 to $80 million price tag to extract itself from the agreement. Listen, I hate to brag because I'm not perfect, but I think I was maybe the first person in the national media to really see that and really point that out, because I say it to say that I tweeted out on Sunday afternoon. I think I was the first person to see it. I tweeted out that according to this article, UCLA is going to pay $60 to $80 million to get out of the Rose Bowl lease. And then I added, it's financial malpractice for an athletic department in the red, and heads should roll for even considering it. At last count, that tweet had over 200 retweets, 2,200 likes, and almost 300,000 impressions. Okay, so let me, as best as I can, try to explain the pluses, the minuses, the benefits, the drawbacks, the reality. Okay, one, UCLA's argument would basically be this. The Rose Bowl, if you've never been there, it is an incredible stadium, but it was built in the 1910s and the 1920s, okay? And basically, it's old school. There's not really suites to speak of. You know, all the amenities that you have in a current stadium, you don't have at the Rose Bowl. And so the argument is that basically you would be able to sell so many suites, so many premium seats, so much all of this, that you would be able to make up that deficit if you're UCLA. Now, listen, only UCLA has the understanding of the financials. But let me just say this. I do question quite a bit if that is actually true, and that it actually offsets the $80 million that you are going to have to pay to leave the Rose Bowl. And first of all, let me even say this. I think there's actually a big contingent of UCLA fans that just don't want it, period. End of story. They love the Rose Bowl. They get the Rose Bowl. They've been going to games there for 50 years. And I think their argument is the reason we haven't been going is because the product stinks. Give us a better product and we'll go back to the Rose Bowl. But I think that also underscores the biggest issue with the argument of it underscores the argument of, well, if we go to SoFi Stadium, we have much more access to suites, premium tickets, whatever. Well, you know how let me put it this way. There's only one way to sell premium seats and suites. You know how you do that? The only way to sell premium seats and suites is to, actually have people come to the stadium. And I'm sorry, if your team stinks, people aren't paying $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, whatever it costs to get a suite at SoFi Stadium if the team is no good. And so to me, spare me all of that and spare me the idea of leaving for SoFi Stadium. Because the thing about SoFi Stadium, I'll give people a little bit of background, okay? Been a million games at both, not a million at SoFi. I've been to 4 or 5 games at SoFi Stadium. It is in the middle of Inglewood. It's not a great place to watch a game. And there's a casino right next door, Hollywood Park Casino. but there really isn't much else to do. And frankly, it's not even safe. I'll tell you a quick side story. I actually went to the Georgia TCU national championship game was at SoFi Stadium. Okay. It was not a good game. And the weather that day was not good. It was actually like, if you remember, you could see it on TV. The stadium has a roof over it, but there's an open end to it. I was actually sitting in the press side, which is the open-ended part, and it was raining onto the field from outside of the stadium, okay? But I bring it up because I remember vividly that day. I remember getting to the stadium early, parking, and getting ready to go in the stadium, but there were Georgia and TCU fans just looking around for something to do. There's only so many people that can hang out at the hotel bar. There's only so many people that can hang out at the casino. And I will tell you, there is essentially no game day atmosphere to speak of at SoFi. It's a beautiful place to watch a game, but there's no tailgating scene. There's no whatever. And so I don't think that there is this huge collection of UCLA fans that are itching to go to UCLA games that just don't want to go to the Rose Bowl. I think they don't want to go to UCLA games because UCLA stinks, and I don't think that moving to to SoFi Stadium makes it more likely that they go to games if the team is not better. And so basically, you're taking everything that people actually love about going to games, and then from there, you are basically saying you're taking away, let me put it this way, you're taking away all of the things that people love about going to games. You're giving them none of that at SoFi Stadium, and you're just banking on it's closer, it's new, people are going to come. I don't buy it. Guess what? All these corporations, if they want to box at SoFi Stadium, they'll go for Rams games. They'll go for Chargers games. They're not going to go to UCLA games if UCLA stinks. And so this is a terrible idea. And it's made worse, by the way, by the fact that they're going to have to pay $60 to $80 million to get out of this lease, okay? And so you look at this situation, okay? It's one thing to pay $60 to $80 million for anything. Fired head coaches, whatever. But two, I would also add this. I would add this about the situation with UCLA, is that it is especially criminal for this specific athletic department that is operating at a deficit, the likes of which is unbelievable. I just did a quick Google search. The Google search said this: UCLA athletics had a $51.85 million deficit for the fiscal year ending in June of 2024, bringing the total deficit over a 6-year period to $219 million. Again, I'm Dr. Evil. $219 million. What are we even talking about, people? You have to be out of your mind. By the way, this from the official UCLA website, ucla.edu, May 23rd of 2025. Athletics director Martin Jarmond has never operated UCLA athletics with less than a $20 million annual deficit. Okay. And so to me, what are we doing? Like, it'd be one thing if the lease was up at the Rose Bowl, it would still be controversial, but whatever. Now you're going to put yourself $60 to $80 million more in debt to go to a place that does not guarantee more revenue. It only guarantees more revenue if more people want to come, and I'm not sold that more people want to come. And so to me, this is financial malpractice. It is completely misunderstanding your fan base. And I don't think UCLA should be taking on $80 million more in debt to get what it's unbelievable. And especially at UCLA. By the way, what was the reason UCLA decided to go to the Big Ten? It was basically the argument that we need the Big Ten TV money and we can sell more tickets to opposing fans. Let me also add this. This is kind of a thing I just thought of off the top of my head. I didn't even have it planned. A big part of UCLA wanting to go to the Big Ten was the notion that, hey, we can sell a lot of tickets to opposing fans. You can go back, ironically, LSU, Coach O's final year. They played at the Rose Bowl. They brought probably 40,000 people to that game, okay? And so I bring it up because I can tell you, as somebody who used to live in Pasadena, people would come to UCLA games just to see their team at the Rose Bowl. I vividly remember I was out to dinner with my wife one time at a Mexican restaurant, and I was like, oh, how's business going? They're like, it's crazy. And they told me, they're like, it was last season. They basically told me this. They said the following weekend, Minnesota was coming to Pasadena for, Minnesota was traveling to UCLA to play a road game, Minnesota at UCLA. And the Minnesota Alumni Association or whatever rented out the entire bar for like 6 hours. They were like, we want the authentic Mexican experience, Mexican food, Mexican drinks, Mexican whatever. They rented out the bar. It was like 200 people. I could give you a million examples like that. I had a buddy, used to walk my dog every morning. We'd walk through kind of this plaza, talk to this guy. He worked at a restaurant. He said, it is crazy how many people are coming in for these UCLA games. And so I'm just here to tell you, I don't think you get 25,000 Nebraska fans or Minnesota fans. By the way, I remember walking my dog. UCLA last year played Iowa on a Friday. I remember walking by a bar at 10 a.m. There was a line of Iowa fans out the door ready to get the party going for a Friday evening game at the Rose Bowl. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get 20,000 Iowa fans, 30,000 Nebraska fans, 15,000 Minnesota fans coming in for these games if you're playing at SoFi Stadium. So the whole thing is crazy. And then, again, it's especially crazy for a UCLA program that is already operating in insane debt. Lastly, I'll say this, and I tweeted this as well. One, I don't want to hear that there's no money for the players. Like, I'm just sorry. I used to be like, anti-paying players and an education is enough. Like, bro, you're paying Brian Kelly $54 million not to coach. UCLA is paying $80 million to get out of the Rose Bowl. I'm sorry. I don't feel bad that you're paying a wide receiver $400,000 and you just benched him. I'm sorry. Spare me the sob story about paying players. The other thing I would say, UCLA, you want to know how you get people to the Rose Bowl? Take the $80 million you're going to spend to get out of the Rose Bowl lease, spend about half of it on a roster. You'll have the number one team in the country, just as Texas Tech. So it is absolutely crazy. It is just insane. Matt, I'm going to save the private equity stuff. The private equity thing to me is kind of interesting. It's a little nerdy, very sketchy from Tony Petiti, though. Before we go, any interesting questions in the chat? Listen, I don't know how interested the world is with that UCLA thing, but I am very passionate about it. I'm very fired up. And by the way, I will say this. There are some people that do want the move. So to be fair to Martin Jarman, the AD, who I actually like, to be fair to UCLA fans, I should mention, I have heard from UCLA fans of I would go to games if it was closer to campus, but the campus, for people who don't know, and this is the other part of the argument, the campus is about 35 miles from the Rose Bowl. It's only about 10, 12 miles from SoFi Stadium. But again, you have a 6 o'clock kickoff. It's still a trek to get there. I could go on and on. I'm passionate about the story. I don't know if nobody else cares. Matt, real quick, let's get to a couple comments before we go ahead and get out of here. Okay. Adam says, it is an old stadium, though. This is the Rose Bowl. Should be a requirement of football schools have stadiums close enough to campuses so students can participate. It's the same for Miami, which now plays a million miles away at Hard Rock Stadium. As someone who's been to Hard Rock Stadium, I can tell you it is very far from the Miami campus. Listen, I don't love it. I get it. Yeah, Matt says Hard Rock sucks. That's another one. Does Hard Rock suck, or does the team that plays on the field just suck? I don't know. UCLA and the Miami Dolphins have the same problem. But it's hard for me to be sympathetic to UCLA situation. You know what? I found a great tweet last night. I forgot to send it to Matt. So there's this guy named G-Fed. I don't know if everyone's familiar with him. He's doing a cross-country stadium tour, big college football fan, young kid, probably 22, 23 years old. I've enjoyed his content. Of all people, I thought he put out the best tweet about it. This is what he said. He said, quote, let me find it. He said, UCLA's two biggest issues with their stadium are this. It's not on campus and they can't sell it out. Alternatives that don't solve one of those two issues isn't worth leaving the Rose Bowl over. How is a 25-year-old kid straight out of college doing, a cross-country road trip have a better perspective on this than the people running UCLA admissions or UCLA athletics? I don't know. Real quick, any other interesting comments in the chat? Rose Bowl knows its influence is waning. This is true, Luke. It is. That's why they finally agreed to move their game up an hour. Yeah, listen, the Rose Bowl needs the CFP. Listen, let me put it this way. This is my stance on the UCLA Rose Bowl thing, is that if the lease was done, if the lease was over, I could understand this. If SoFi Stadium was 10 minutes from campus with an incredible tailgating scene and it was a destination for opposing fans and everybody wanted to go to games there, I would understand it. I am just here to tell you it is none of those things. It is closer to campus, but not significantly. Nebraska and Iowa fans are not making a pilgrimage to. Let me put it this way. You've heard of people making a pilgrimage to the Rose Bowl. Have you ever heard of people making a pilgrimage to SoFi Stadium? I don't think so. And then 3, it's the fact that you have to pay $80 million to get out of the lease and that you're UCLA. If this was Ohio State and they were printing money, I would feel another way. Again, if the lease was ending next year, I would understand it. But you're talking about a lease that runs through 2044, $80 million. Remember, by the way, here's the other thing about the UCLA situation that's totally unique. When they left the Pac-12, they still owe Cal millions of dollars because Cal and UCLA are in the same school system. And basically, Cal was able to argue in court that UCLA was hurting Cal, so UCLA has to pay Cal an annual fee for leaving the Pac-12 and breaking up the Pac-12. So you're already paying Cal. Now you're going to pay the Rose Bowl, even if it's over the totality of the lease, another 18 years or whatever it is. We're still talking about millions of dollars a year that you're paying the Rose Bowl not to go there. It just doesn't make fiscal sense. Okay, I'm not a good businessman, but I own my own company. I know what's good business. I know what's not. It's unbelievable. Anything else, Matt, before we get out of here? CFB is about games on campus. It's not on campus. No one cares. My counter to that is, you know what else isn't on campus? You know what else is not on campus? I don't know. SoFi Stadium. SoFi Stadium is still without traffic. 25-minute drive, 30-minute drive. I'm not going to argue with people. If you feel differently, it's perfectly fine. If I do a show where you agree with everything I say, it means I'm doing a boring-ass show. Excuse my language. What I'm saying is I'm just telling you the logistics of it. The last thing I would say, and I probably didn't make this point well enough, UCLA gets fans when the team is good. I told you I moved in 2012, okay? In 2012, UCLA was getting 65, 70, 75,000 people in that stadium. You know what else happened that year? They played for a Pac-12 championship. And so it can be done. If you build it, people will come. They haven't built crap, though. The other thing, totally random, but Chip Kelly did not help the situation. Chip Kelly, I always said, probably the worst college coach I've ever been around in terms of doing stuff to promote the program. He was the definition of the dude that just wanted to coach ball. That's why he left the head coaching job to be an OC at Ohio State. You don't want to deal with all this crap. But it hurt UCLA. I always say, Mick Cronin, for all his faults, and boy, does that guy whine a lot. Saw him whining again last night. He does promote the program. Petros and Money is probably the biggest local radio show. Mick Cronin goes on every week all year long. So it could be July, and he's on there talking UCLA basketball, okay? And so I just bring it up because Chip Kelly didn't help. Deshaun Foster losing to New Mexico and UNLV didn't help, although I know the UNLV game was not at the Rose Bowl. Just low vibes from UCLA football right now. I'm going to go ahead and look through the chat as well. Matt, if you got anything interesting, let me know. Another good show, AT. Thanks. P.S. Go Cats. Thank you. We got listeners from all over. We got Adam in Orlando. We got South Texas from our Aztecs fan. Ethan, as we get ready for basketball, says, Remember, we throw L's down. All right, so I'll tell you what. I think that's a good time for us to get out of here. We do have tonight's actually an awesome slate of college basketball. Kentucky Louisville is the headliner, but then also on top of it, we have Illinois and Texas Tech. That's going to be a good one. Creighton and Gonzaga. I was planning on just doing a live show after the Kentucky Louisville game, but I think we just might do a show tomorrow morning to recap it all. All right, I'll tell you what, we are going to get out of here. Before we do, you know what we got to do? We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our hotel and casino partner. We got to thank Circa Sportsbook, okay? Kentucky fans, by the way, listen, we're going to talk about that new sportsbook at Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky. So first of all, let me say this. Circa, we love working with Circa. They have the best sportsbook on planet Earth in Vegas. I was just there doing live shows from Stadium Swim, Circa, all of that just the other day. But in addition to the incredible facility that they have in Vegas, they have also opened up a brand new sportsbook at Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky. All of the same wonderful hospitality of the facility in Vegas has come to the East Coast now. So it's right on that Tennessee-Kentucky border. Matt and I will be down there. We'll be doing some shows there at some point here in the not-too-distant future. But Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky, it's right on the border. It's actually the closest sportsbook to Nashville. So if you need to watch some games, if you're caught up in this YouTube TV nonsense, check out the Circa Sportsbook, Mint Kentucky Downs. By the way, I'm trying to see if they have an updated line on college football, on the college hoops game tonight, Kentucky versus Louisville. I cannot find one, but if you download the Circa Sportsbook app, that will be no problem. By the way, Kentucky 17-1 to win the national championship at Circa, 26-1 if you're a Louisville Cardinals fan. So you might want to get in on that because whoever wins tonight, obviously those odds will change. Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. Also, if you are in the state of Kentucky, you can download the Circa Sportsbook app. All right, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Before we do, want to remind everybody, first of all, thank you. Monster audience today. Great show. Also, as Luke says, college football playoff rankings are tonight. I'll say this really quickly. One, interested to see what happens with BYU football after they lose the game. How much is the Big 12 punished? You'd think they can't fall beyond 12, and I'll tell you why the answer would be 12 there. Utah is 13. BYU beat Utah. So I would think that BYU falls to 12. That's kind of an interesting thing, especially with Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, and Georgia this weekend. Texas and Oklahoma trying to avoid their third loss. So we have the college football playoff rankings. All right, we're going to get out of here. Thank you for your support. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. CawleyPuffs.com. Thank you to Cawley Puffs for their support. Thank you to Circa Sportsbook as well. Time for me to run. Thank you all so much. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-Ed. Unblock me, bro. I will be back tomorrow morning. Unless if something really crazy happens in Kentucky, Louisville, maybe I'll come back late tonight. But let's plan for tomorrow morning, a new episode